Friends, welcome to St. Anthony's Catholic Student Center at the UTSA. Finding, selling, casting. At the end of a semester, a professor would typically ask the students, or even at the end of a class, a session, the professor would ask the students, or the teacher would ask our pupils, do you understand all these things? And the students most of the time answer, yes, we do. Today, on this 17th Sunday in Ordinary Time, Jesus gives us three more parables of the kingdom. Finding the greatest pearl, the treasure in the field, and the cast which is thrown into the deep waters. Do you understand all these things? The treasure and delight of knowing God's wisdom. Wisdom is not simply going about doing one's own things, but doing with efficiency and prudence, with diligence. Wisdom is like finding the treasure in digging the field. Wisdom is to look for that pearl of greatest price. Wisdom is to cast our nets deep into the ocean. Parable 1, finding the treasure in the field. The man was not simply scraping the ground. He was intentional in digging it, invested into it. He is purposeful. It would be a sad thing if for us only to find God in church structures, within religious teachings, once in a while to feel God. Faith, which is informed by wisdom, is about digging deep to find the greatest treasure. The parable 2, finding the greatest pearl. When finding it, you are prepared to sell everything away for that one thing. Is to know the loveliest thing in the world is to have this wisdom, this fidelity, diligence. There are other pearls too, which we need. Could be knowledge, sport, art, literature, skill, entrepreneurial skills, business skills. But the greatest pearl is to have the wisdom to do God's will. To have wisdom to do God's will. This is the supreme beauty, the supreme principle of all knowledge. So that when finding the wisdom to do God's will, we will find everything else. But for us, sometimes we run after everything else, but not find wisdom. We will lack that prudence and diligence. It is not to belittle other things, other skills, but the supreme good is to do God's will. To find that greatest pearl, which makes us friends with God, which makes us build friendship with God. In the second reading, St. Paul writing to the Romans emphasizes this point. To do everything according to God's will, according to God's purpose, to do God's will. That is to find the greatest pearl. The third parable about casting the net. In Palestine of the ancient Near East, there are two ways to catch fish. One is to cast the net from the shore, but the other is to go deep into the waters and cast the net. The parable talks about the latter, the second one, to go into the deep waters and cast the net. As St. John Paul II would say, duc in alto, to cast on nets wide and deep for a greater catch. And this net is a square type cords at each end weighted upright on water, so as the weight would push the net to go down for a deeper catch. When the boat is moving in the deep waters, the square net would form like a triangle. The square net would become like a triangle, gathering all, making the fish to be contained within that shape. It is the dragnet, which is the church. Human institution does not discriminate. The content of the catch is a great mixture. All kinds, all colors, languages, tribes, nations. That is the work and the mission of the church. The wisdom is to cast the net and not to discriminate, because discrimination is not our job. Judgment is not our task. It belongs to God. Our task is simply to cast the net for a greater catch. The knowledge and the commandments, when we bring that to God, our knowledge is illuminated. When we bring our skills to God, they are put to a greater and wider use of the church. The task is everyone who comes to Jesus with some gift and ability, some talent, then when we place them at the feet of Jesus, it becomes the greatest pearl, the greatest treasure, and gives us ability for the greatest catch. Sometimes we might think to give up and not concentrate. A scholar does not give up his scholarship, but uses it for the church and Christ. A painter, an artist, a sports person, a business person, an entrepreneur don't give up their skills, but to put them according to God's purpose, according to God's will, so that they will turn out to be the greatest treasure, the finest pearl, leading to the greatest catch. The task is, do we bring these to the feet of Jesus, the wisdom teacher? Our task, with the gifts we are given, with wisdom that God gives us, to find that greatest treasure, to look for that finest pearl, and to cast our nets wide and deep. Finding, casting, and selling. And to do all this, we need wisdom. To do everything according to God's purpose, according to God's will. Then we will find the greatest treasure hidden in the field, the finest pearl for which we are ready to sell everything, and to have the greatest catch. Father Praveen Lakisetti here at St. Anthony's Catholic Student Center at UTSA. Thank you and God bless.